There is a force more deadly than any enemy, more crippling than any wound, more silent than any poison. The ancient samurai called it taida, the slow death of the spirit. We call it laziness, but it is not what you think. Laziness is not the absence of action. It is the absence of purpose. It is the fog that settles when a man forgets why he is alive. And once it takes root, it devours everything. Your discipline, your honor, your very soul. The samurai understood this. They knew that the greatest battle was not on the battlefield. It was the daily war against the decay of the self. So they created a method, not a motivational speech, not a fleeting burst of inspiration, but a system, ancient, brutal, and unbreakable. A system that turned weakness into strength, hesitation into action, and the hollow man into the warrior. Deep in the Edo period, there lived a young samurai named Kaito. He was born into honor, trained in technique, but cursed with a poison far worse than cowardice. He was consumed by inertia. Every morning, he woke with grand intentions. Every night, he slept having done nothing, until his clan master sent him to a forgotten temple in the northern mountains, where a monk known only as the Unmoved awaited. What Kaito learned there would not just destroy his laziness. It would rebuild him from ash. This is that method. And by the end, you will understand why the samurai never struggled with laziness again. Chapter 1: The Warrior Who Could Not Move. Kaito stood at the edge of the training ground, watching. Always watching. His brothers in arms moved through sword forms with precision, bodies flowing like water, blades singing through morning air. Sweat glistened on their faces. Their breath came hard and earned, and Kaito stood still. Not because he lacked skill. His father had been a decorated general. His lineage was steeped in warrior blood. He had been trained since childhood in the way of the blade, the code of Bushido, the discipline that forged legends. But somewhere between knowing and doing, Kaito had become frozen. Every morning, he woke with plans, grand visions of what he would accomplish. He would train harder than anyone, master new techniques, prove his worth to the clan. But when the moment came to move, to step onto the training ground, to pick up his sword, to begin, something stopped him. Not fear, not doubt. Something worse. A heaviness, a fog, a voice that whispered, "Why? What difference will it make? Tomorrow. You'll start tomorrow," and tomorrow never came. His fellow warriors noticed. At first, they asked if he was injured. Then they stopped asking. They gave him a new name, spoken in whispers. Uri, the ghost. Present, but not alive. His father's shame was heavier than any armor. The old general would look at his son with eyes that held more disappointment than anger. Anger could be answered. Disappointment was a judgment without appeal. One evening, as cherry blossoms fell like snow across the compound, the clan master, Lord Takeda, summoned Kaito to his chamber. The old master sat in silence for a long time, studying the young samurai who could not move. Finally, he spoke. "You believe you lack willpower." Kaito nodded, shame burning in his chest. "You are wrong." Lord Takeda's voice was not unkind, but it was absolute. Willpower is a flame. It burns bright and dies fast. You do not need more fire, Kaito. You need a forge. "I don't understand, Master." "No, you do not, but you will." The master handed him a rolled parchment. "There is a temple in the northern mountains. A monk lives there. They call him the Unmoved. He has transformed men like you, men who possess everything except the ability to act. You will go to him. You will stay until you are forged, or until you are broken. Kaito wanted to protest, to promise he would change on his own, to beg for one more chance. But the words died in his throat, because he had made those promises before, to his father, to himself. And every promise had dissolved like morning mist. 3 days later, Kaito began the climb into the northern mountains. The path was steep and lonely. With each step, the noise of the world fell away, the clang of training swords, the voices of warriors, the weight of watching eyes. The silence was both relief and terror, because in the silence, he could no longer hide from himself. The climb took most of the day. When Kaito finally reached the summit, exhausted and hungry, he found a simple temple built from weathered wood and stone. Smoke rose from a small fire. Prayer flags fluttered in the wind, and carved into the stone arch above the temple gate, worn smooth by centuries of weather, was a single phrase: movement begins in stillness. Kaito stared at those words, feeling something shift beneath his ribs, a hairline fracture in the armor of his paralysis. Perhaps Lord Takeda was right. Perhaps the battle he had been avoiding was not out there. It was here. It had always been here. Chapter 2. The first discipline. Ritual over motivation. The monk was nothing like Kaito expected. The Unmoved was not imposing, not mystical, not even particularly old. He was simply present, utterly, completely present in every action. When he poured tea, the act contained no distraction. When he swept the temple steps, there was no mind wandering elsewhere. He moved as if choreographed by the universe itself. "You are Kaito," the monk said. It was not a question. "Yes, master. I have been sent to. I know why you are here." The Unmoved's eyes were calm as still water. "You wake with intentions. You sleep with regret. You believe you need motivation, inspiration, some spark to finally make you move." Kaito nodded, stunned by the accuracy. "You are wrong. Motivation is a pleasant visitor. But you cannot build a life waiting for visitors." The monk gestured to a simple sleeping mat in the corner. "You will stay here, and you will follow the schedule, exactly, every day." "What schedule, master?" The Unmoved handed him a small wooden board. On it was carved a simple routine. Bell at dawn, rise, wash, sit in meditation, 1 hour, eat in silence, train, 2 hours work, temple maintenance, sit again, 1 hour, eat in silence, reflection, sleep. Kaito studied the board, confused. "Master, I came here to learn advanced techniques, secret practices. I thought, you thought incorrectly." The monk's voice was gentle, but immovable. "There are no secrets. There is only this. Ritual destroys the need for motivation." "I don't understand." "You will. Tomorrow, the bell rings at dawn. You will rise, not because you want to, not because you feel inspired, but because the bell has rung. That is the first discipline." That night, Kaito lay awake, insulted and confused. He had expected warrior training, philosophical revelation, transformation. Instead, he had been given a schedule, like a child. But when the bell rang at dawn, sharp and clear in the mountain silence, something unexpected happened. His body rose before his mind could protest. The ritual had begun. For the first 3 days, Kaito's mind fought every moment. His thoughts screamed that this was pointless, that he should be doing something more important, that he wasn't feeling it today. But the ritual did not care what he felt. Bell rings. Rise, wash, Sit. The schedule did not negotiate, and slowly, so slowly, he almost didn't notice, the resistance began to weaken. Not because he suddenly wanted to meditate at dawn, but because the question of whether to meditate had been removed. The ritual had replaced choice with structure. Modern neuroscience would later discover what the unmoved knew instinctively: that habits bypass the energy-expensive prefrontal cortex and run on autopilot through the basal ganglia. That willpower is a finite resource, depleted by decision-making. That the strongest discipline is the kind that requires no decision at all. The samurai had understood this for centuries. They called it kata, the way. Not the inspiration, not the motivation. The way, the path walked regardless of feeling. By the end of the second week, something remarkable happened. Kaito woke before the bell, not because he was excited, not because he was motivated, but because his body had learned the pattern. The ritual had carved new grooves in his being, and he was beginning to move through them naturally. That morning, as he sat in meditation with the dawn light breaking over the mountains, he realized something profound. He had not felt the fog of laziness in days. Not because the fog had been defeated in some grand battle, but because the ritual had made the fog irrelevant. Action was no longer something he waited to feel ready for. Action had become what he did, because it was time to do it. But moving the body was only the beginning. Next, he would have to move the soul. Chapter 3. The second discipline, the practice of micro-death. 3 weeks into the ritual, Kaito was transformed. Or so he thought. He rose at dawn without resistance. He completed his tasks with precision. The fog that had paralyzed him seemed to have lifted. But the unmoved saw deeper. One morning, as Kaito finished his meditation, the monk spoke. "You have learned to move, but you still do not understand why you must move." Kaito frowned. "I move because the ritual demands it." "Yes, and when the ritual is gone? When you return to your life and there is no bell, no structure, no monk watching, what then?" The question unsettled him, because he knew the answer. The fog would return. "There's a sickness beneath your laziness," the unmoved continued. "Your paralysis is not physical. It is existential. You do not act because action feels meaningless. You wait for certainty, for the perfect moment, for some guarantee that your effort will matter." Every word landed like a blade. "So now, you will learn the second discipline, the practice that transforms motion into purpose." The monk's eyes held something ancient and absolute. The samurai called it shoji no renshu, the practice of micro-death. Death practice. Each morning, before dawn, you will sit alone, and you will mentally rehearse your death, not as philosophy, not as metaphor, as reality. Kaito's chest tightened. "Master, You will imagine your body cold, your name forgotten, your strength never used, your potential buried with you. You will imagine dying today, with everything you planned still undone." "Why would I do this?" The unmoved's voice was soft but merciless. "Because you have been living as if you have endless time. And that lie has made you weak. The samurai understood what you have forgotten. Death is not someday. Death is always now, waiting just behind the next breath." The next morning, before the bell, Kaito sat alone in darkness, and he imagined himself dead. At first, it was uncomfortable, strange. His mind resisted the exercise like touching hot iron. But the unmoved had given him clear instructions. See your body still. Feel the absence of breath. Know that this, right now, today, could be your last. Then imagine all the things you will never do. The sword skills never mastered. The honor never earned. The man you could have become, erased before he was born. The practice gutted him. Tears came, not from sadness, but from the brutal confrontation with truth. He had been wasting his life, not boldly, not dramatically, but quietly, one postponed action at a time. Modern psychology calls this mortality salience, the awareness of death's certainty. Research shows it sharpens focus, eliminates trivial concerns, and drives purposeful action. The samurai had practiced this for centuries, knowing that a warrior who remembers death cannot afford to waste time on hesitation. After 2 weeks of micro-death practice, something in Kaito changed fundamentally. He no longer waited for the right moment to act, because he knew there was no right moment. There was only this moment, and then there was nothing. One morning, he noticed a section of the temple wall that needed repair, a task he would normally have postponed, waiting for more time or better conditions. But this morning, he simply began. Not because he felt motivated, not because the conditions were perfect, but because the alternative, dying with the wall still broken, had become unacceptable. The Unmoved watched from the temple entrance, silent approval in his eyes. Kaito was beginning to understand. Laziness is not a failure of energy. It is a failure to remember that you are dying. But knowing death was close was not enough. He still had to learn to move with the weight. Chapter 4. The third discipline. The burden before the path. By the 6th week, Kaito had become consistent. He moved daily. He acted without waiting for perfect conditions. The ritual and the awareness of death had transformed him from a ghost into a man who did what needed doing. But the Unmoved was not satisfied. One morning, as Kaito prepared for training, the monk approached, carrying a river stone, smooth, heavy, the size of 2 fists. "You have learned to walk the path," the Unmoved said. "Now, you must learn to carry the stone." He placed the stone in Kaito's hands. It was heavier than it looked. "You will carry this everywhere. When you train, when you eat, when you meditate. It does not leave your side." Kaito stared at the stone, confused. "Master, how am I supposed to train with this in my hands?" "That is not my concern. You will find a way." "But why? This serves no purpose. It only makes everything harder." The Unmoved's eyes held the patience of mountains. "You think the stone is unnecessary, but the weight is teaching you something you still have not learned. The path is always harder than you want it to be, and that is the point. Suffering for suffering's sake is not wisdom, Master. You are right. But this is not suffering for its sake. This is training for truth. You have learned to act, but you still wait for ease. You move when the resistance lessens. You train when your body feels ready. You are still negotiating with reality, hoping it will become comfortable." The monk's voice grew quieter, but more absolute. "The stone teaches you that action does not require comfort. You move not because it is easy. You move because you have decided to move. The weight is irrelevant." For days, Kaito hated the stone. It made training clumsy, eating awkward, meditation almost impossible. His shoulders ached, his hands cramped. He argued with the Unmoved. He presented logical reasons why the stone was counterproductive. The monk's only response, "Carry it anyway," Modern research on stress inoculation training and cognitive load reveals what the samurai knew intuitively, that training under deliberately difficult conditions builds resilience that transfers to all areas of life, that the brain adapts to resistance, strengthening neural pathways for perseverance. That comfort is the enemy of growth. Slowly, grudgingly, Kaito stopped resenting the stone. He learned to hold it while executing sword forms, adjusting his balance, finding new ways to move. He learned to eat one-handed, the stone resting in his lap. He learned to meditate with its weight pressing into his palms, using it as an anchor for focus. And something unexpected happened. The stone stopped feeling like a burden. It became a reminder that discipline is not the absence of resistance. It is the willingness to move forward while carrying it. One dawn, the Unmoved woke Kaito before the bell and led him to the base of a steep mountain trail. Climb to the summit with the stone. Kaito looked up at the path disappearing into mist. It was steep, treacherous, hours of climbing, but he did not argue. He did not negotiate. He simply began. One step, then another. The stone heavy in his hands, his legs burning, his breath ragged. But his mind was calm, because he had learned the weight is not the problem. Waiting for the weight to disappear is the problem. When he reached the summit, the sun was breaking over the horizon, painting the world gold. The Unmoved was waiting there, though Kaito had not seen him on the path. "How did you—" "I know another way." The monk smiled faintly. "But you needed to take the hard path, to learn that you can carry the burden and still arrive." Kaito looked down at the stone in his hands. It was just a rock, but it had taught him more than any lecture could. You do not wait for life to become easy. You become strong enough to move through its weight. But there was one final test, the test that would reveal whether his discipline was real or merely performance. Chapter 5. The fourth discipline, the unwitnessed act. 3 months had passed since Kaito arrived at the temple. He was no longer the hollow man who could not move. He rose at dawn without thought. He acted without waiting for ease. He carried weight without complaint. But on a cold morning, with frost painting the temple stones silver, the Unmoved summoned him. "You have learned much, but there is one final test." Kaito bowed, ready. "You have learned to act in structure. Now you must learn to act in silence." The monk's gaze was penetrating. "You will go into the forest alone for 7 days. You will take no food except what you gather. And each day, you will perform one act of discipline, difficult and meaningful, that no one will ever know about." "I don't understand, Master." "No one will witness it. No one will praise it. No one will record it. The act itself must be its only reward." The Unmoved's voice was gentle but absolute. "This is the final test of the samurai method. Can you act when no one will ever know?" The question struck Kaito like cold water, because he realized, with uncomfortable clarity, that much of his recent discipline had still been performance. He trained hard when the Unmoved watched. He carried the stone with determination when others might see. But what would he do in complete solitude, with no audience at all? That afternoon, Kaito entered the forest alone. The first day, he found a trail that had collapsed in a landslide, trees blocking the path, rocks scattered, mud thick and treacherous. No one used this trail anymore. Clearing it would take hours of brutal work, and no one would ever know he had done it. His mind presented 100 arguments. This is pointless. Save your energy. No one will benefit. But beneath those arguments lived the truth. The unmoved had been cultivating. The value of an act is not determined by who sees it. Kaito cleared the trail. His hands bled. His back screamed. But when the path was passable again, he felt something he had never experienced. Pride without audience. Satisfaction without validation. This is what I do, whether witnessed or not. The second day, he carved a small shrine marker deep in the forest where no traveler would ever see it, dedicating it to all the warriors who had walked this path before him. The third day, he fasted completely and meditated in a cave, his effort having no witness but stone and darkness. Each day, the practice deepened. He was shedding the final layer of his old self, the part that needed recognition, that measured worth by external approval, that only acted when action could be seen. Modern psychology recognizes this as the shift from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation. The movement from action for reward to action for its own sake. The samurai understood it as mushin, the mind without ego, acting purely because action aligns with who you have chosen to be. On the seventh day, as Kaito prepared to return to the temple, he sat beside a stream and understood the final teaching. The ultimate destruction of laziness is not action. It is action without the need for reward. Because laziness thrives in the gap between effort and validation. It whispers, "Why bother if no one will notice?" But when you become the kind of person who acts regardless, who does what must be done simply because you have decided that is who you are, laziness has no foothold. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. You are no longer waiting for conditions to be perfect. You are simply the person who does. When Kaito returned to the temple, the unmoved was waiting at the gate. No words were spoken. But the monk's eyes held something Kaito had never seen. Recognition, not of a student, of an equal. The unmoved bowed, and Kaito understood. The teaching was complete. Now came the hardest part, carrying the forge back into the world. Chapter 6. The Return. The forge made flesh. When Kaito descended the mountain, the world had not changed, but he had. The compound looked the same. Training grounds busy with warriors, the smell of steel and sweat, the rhythmic clash of practice bouts. His father still walked the perimeter with the bearing of a general. The clan master still observed from his pavilion. But Kaito returned different, not louder, not boastful, not carrying certificates or stories of mystical transformation. He simply returned acting differently. The first morning, he woke before dawn, not because a bell rang, but because the ritual lived in him now. He washed. He sat in meditation alone in the garden. Then he walked to the training ground and began his sword forms. No announcement, no grand return, just movement. His fellow warriors noticed immediately, not because Kaito spoke of his training, but because he moved with something they had never seen in him before: inevitability. His strikes were precise. His stance was rooted. But more than technique, there was a quality. A man who had stopped negotiating with himself. Hideaki, the warrior who had mocked him months ago, approached cautiously. "You're different." "Yes. What happened up there?" Kaito considered the question. How could he explain the ritual, the micro-death practice, the stone, the unwitnessed acts? How could he compress 3 months of transformation into words? Finally, he said simply, I stopped negotiating with myself. Hideaki frowned, not understanding, but Kaito's father understood. The old general approached his son after training, studying him with eyes that had seen 1,000 warriors. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something it had not held in years: pride. "Welcome home, Kaito." That evening, Lord Takeda summoned him to his chamber. "The Unmoved has sent word," the clan master said. "He says your training is complete, that you carry the forge now." "The forge, master?" "The system, the method, the thing that turns weak men into warriors, not through motivation, but through transformation of being." Lord Takeda's eyes gleamed. "Tell me, Kaito, what did you learn?" Kaito thought of the bell at dawn, the micro-death practice, the stone, the unwitnessed acts. "I learned that discipline is not built on desire. It is built on ritual that makes action inevitable. I learned that death is always close, and that knowledge eliminates hesitation. I learned that the path is always harder than I want, and that accepting this is strength. And I learned that the ultimate discipline is acting when no one will ever know, because that is when you discover who you truly are." Lord Takeda nodded slowly. "The samurai method, ancient, brutal, unbreakable, and now it lives in you." "But master," Kaito said carefully, "I still feel resistance sometimes. Doubt. The fog tries to return. Of course, those things are human. The difference is this: you are no longer controlled by them. You move anyway. That is mastery." The weeks that followed proved the truth of those words. Kaito's new life was not free of resistance or doubt or days when his body craved rest, but those things no longer governed him. He trained at dawn, not because he wanted to, but because it was dawn, and training is what he did. He completed what he began, not because it was easy, but because completion was now his nature. He helped younger warriors without seeking credit, because action without witness had become his standard. The transformation was so complete, so integrated, that others began to seek him out. A young samurai named Riku, plagued by the same paralysis that had once consumed Kaito, approached him one morning. "They say you were once like me, frozen, unable to move. Is it true?" "Yes." "How did you change?" Kaito looked at the young warrior, seeing his past self reflected in those desperate eyes. And he understood why the Unmoved had taught him, not just for his own salvation, but so the method could be passed forward. "Do not seek motivation," Kaito said quietly. "Build the ritual, and let the ritual carry you." "But what if I don't feel like—" "The ritual does not care what you feel. That is its power. Rise when you decide to rise. Train when it is time to train. Act not because you want to, but because you have forged yourself into the kind of person who acts. The wanting will come later, or it won't, but you will have already moved." Riku stared at him, something kindling in his eyes. And Kaito understood. The Unmoved had not just transformed one man. He had created a forge that could transform many. That night, sitting alone in the garden with moonlight painting the stones silver, Kaito thought of the monk on the mountain. He thought of the bell at dawn, the micro-death practice, the stone, the unwitnessed acts, and he understood the final truth. Laziness had not been destroyed. It had been made irrelevant. Because Kaito was no longer a man who waited for the right feeling, the right moment, the right conditions. He was a man who moved. Not because moving was easy, but because that was what he had forged himself to do. The question was no longer, should I? The question had become, this is what I do. And in that shift, from negotiation to inevitability, lived the complete destruction of laziness. Not through force, not through willpower, but through the ancient samurai method, ritual over motivation, death as teacher, burden as strength, action without witness. The fog could not survive in that forge, and Kaito had become the forge itself. Moral: the ancient samurai destroyed laziness not by fighting it with willpower, but by building a system where action became as natural as breathing, and where the question of should I was replaced with this is what I do.